the games makers. They made such an impact to the atmosphere in London. And there was kind of this very much active, engaged group of volunteers who were looking for something else to do. A lot of them enjoyed their experiences at the Olympics. So kind of we saw a gap in the market almost of kind of, okay, we've got these volunteers. How do we keep them engaged? How do we offer them other opportunities to make sure that their volunteering journey doesn't start and end with the Olympics, but that is just the beginning. And yeah, I feel we've done a fairly good job of that.
That was Matt Doherty, City Volunteer Manager for the Greater London Authority. Having worked alongside some of the world's largest events, including the European Champs, Com Games, the Australian Open and now the Euros, Matt is no stranger to engaging with volunteers in a large capacity. In this episode of the podcast, we get an in-depth look into the Greater London Authority's legacy project from the 2012 Games, Team London, an incredible example of how cities can engage with communities through a centralised city-wide volunteer program. After the success of the London Olympics and a renewed interest in volunteering, the City of London made the sustainable move to invest in a volunteer management program designed to provide a year-round opportunities for individuals looking to volunteer. From major events to community volunteering and serving a third sector, Team London has around 15,000 engaged volunteers for the community to utilise. In this podcast, Matt shares how programs such as Team London have been instrumental in supporting London's major events like the Euros, but also more importantly, how volunteers were able to be utilised by the NHS at hospitals and vaccination centres during the peak of the pandemic, which many cities around the world can relate to. Now, if this is your first time listening to the podcast, then welcome. The Engage Volunteer podcast aims to highlight the ways in which organisations and individuals are engaging their communities to connect them to events and causes they're passionate about. The best way to support us is to click follow button wherever you listen to the podcast and make sure you never miss an episode. We'd also love to get your feedback on the podcast and suggestions you may have for any guests that you'd love to hear from. Please do feel free to contact us via our website or LinkedIn. Feel free to tell your friends and colleagues about us too. Enjoy. Matt Doherty, City Volunteer Manager at the Euros 2020 and the Women's Euros 2022. Mate, thank you so much for joining us on the Engage Volunteer. How are you, mate?
All good, yeah. Thanks very much for having me.
No worries, mate. It's fine. So we obviously find you in London at the moment, don't we? Whereabouts are you in London?
Just north of the river in a nice little neighbourhood called Wapping, which, yeah, not too far from central London and the GLA offices.
Sure. So you've moved close to the offices, and did you say you're working from home now?
Yeah, the whole ironic thing of move nice and close to the office to be able to get there, and then a worldwide pandemic hits and been working from home a fair amount. But yeah, no, it's a nice little spot, and yeah, we've got a bit more freedom at the moment, and yeah, hopefully things are heading in the right direction with vaccines and bits like that.
Yeah, a lot Australia can probably learn from what you've done over there. Look, for our listeners, at the end of this podcast, we'll really dive into Team London and how volunteering works in the Greater London Authority. But just for our listeners now, could you just give us a quick snapshot of your role, obviously the major events focus, but then perhaps the wider organisation that is Team London and the legacy as well from the 2012 Games?
Yeah, of course. So yeah, as you mentioned, my role is the City Volunteer Manager for the Men's Euro 2020, which we've just completed this summer, and then now kind of starting to look ahead to the Women's Euros in 2022, which is across the whole of England, but with the final being held in London. That role and kind of my team sits within a kind of department called Team London and Sport, which is essentially the volunteering arm of the Greater London Authority. So we kind of cover everything from community volunteering, third sector, as well as kind of the major events and kind of events-focused volunteering, which is obviously where the Euros fit in. Within that team, we've also kind of got some kind of regular event volunteering. So, for example, regular events in London, such as London Marathon, New Year's Eve fireworks, St. Patrick's Day parade, any kind of big event in London, we also kind of deploy volunteers at. And we also have a visitor welcome program, which runs every summer across the summer holidays, where we kind of, again, deploy a couple of hundred volunteers across the city at kind of main tourist attractions, just to help visitors in London and make sure they can understand how the tube works, make sure they know what sites to go see, and kind of came about as a legacy piece after the Olympics in 2012. We wanted to try and find a way to maintain and engage volunteers and have a bit of a legacy after that. So that's kind of how the London ambassadors came around, and yeah, we've been volunteering every summer in London since 2012.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, as we were discussing before, I've always seen the City of London as having the world's best
sort of community engagement volunteering program in the world, which is incredible for you guys and the team to work on that. Such an incredible program. What kind of numbers are we talking there? Do you know roughly about how many sort of volunteers you're engaging, how many activities or opportunities you're working with across the business?
Yeah, so I think on various different mailing lists and kind of different portals and volunteer management systems, we've got kind of anywhere between, I'd say, kind of 10 and 15,000 volunteer applications, profiles even. Obviously, not all of them are active and engaged, but yeah, it's kind of people kind of choose their different opportunities. Some people do like the kind of one-off opportunities or kind of an annual basis, whereas a lot of other people are doing more regular things with our kind of partner organisations on kind of a weekly basis in their local communities. So yeah, it's a rough guess, but yeah, I'd say something in that figure. And then in terms of the actual opportunities we have, the ones that we're managing, I'd say we deploy volunteers anywhere between 20 and 30 events a year. Obviously, kind of pandemics aside, it hasn't been as busy in the last year or so. And then kind of we've got lots of partner organisations who filter their opportunities onto our Team London website. And again, depending on kind of time of year and bits like that, I'd say there's anywhere between 100 and 200 volunteers, opportunities for volunteers on the website.
Yeah, fantastic. Incredible numbers. And how many team members do you have across that sort of volunteering department? Obviously, there's your team in the major events. What does that team look like? And then perhaps across the wider organisation?
Yeah, so within Team London and Sport, I'd say the department has kind of probably about 35 or so employees and kind of all doing different elements of kind of the third sector and volunteering. Within kind of my team and the major events volunteering side, I'd say it's kind of 5 or 6 of us. Again, that fluctuates throughout the year. During the summer, we normally get kind of a short-term support just because that's our busy period. And then obviously events like the Euros, we tend to bulk up our team a little bit as well, just because, yeah, again, it's more volunteers, more work to do. So yeah, we during the Euros we were kind of up to kind of maybe 8 or 9 people within our team.
Yeah, awesome, mate. And it's a tricky question, but it's like, why do you think the London invests so heavily in volunteer engagement? Because there's a lot of cities, major cities around the world that do not have programs like you guys, clearly. Like, what is it? Is it more a sense of connection for your community in London that you're wanting to provide in that central place? Or is it to solve the gap of finding volunteers for the events and charities that need them? Clearly a bit of both. What are your thoughts about why you guys exist?
Yeah, I think obviously the Olympics helped London massively. I think it was, I'd say, if you asked 100 people what they thought of the Olympics, I'd say 99 people would say it was massively positive. Obviously, everyone remembers at any of these major events, but maybe particularly London, kind of the games makers, they made such an impact to the atmosphere in London, and there was kind of this very much active, engaged group of volunteers who were looking for something else to do. A lot of them enjoyed their experiences at the Olympics. So kind of we saw a gap in the market almost of kind of, okay, we've got these volunteers. How do we keep them engaged? How do we offer them other opportunities to make sure that their volunteering journey doesn't start and end with the Olympics, but that is just the beginning? And yeah, I feel we've done a fairly good job of that, of kind of keeping people engaged. We certainly do still have volunteers who did start out at London 2012 and they're still going strong with us now, but kind of equally wanted to make sure that even if you didn't volunteer at London 2012, there's still open opportunities to join our programme and yeah, offer that difference between not just the Olympic size events, but also helping out at your local allotments, helping, I don't know, people get their shopping. Yeah, lots of different opportunities from either end of the spectrum in terms of kind of the massive events to local community ones.
Yeah, I think London, everyone knows it as such a multicultural city. What an incredible way to integrate with your community. There might be new people that are in town through volunteering. Have you seen that much in the work that you've done, or perhaps other departments, as a real noticeable reason for existing, is to help people integrate more with their community via volunteering?
Yeah, I think so. I think although London is obviously a massive city, there's all these tiny pockets of different communities and different groups, which on the surface is really hard to engage with, which is why kind of our approach of obviously kind of hosting the big opportunities like the Euros, which can kind of capture the hearts of the whole city, but also kind of with our partner organisations of the kind of the really small community-based organisations who are just looking for a handful of volunteers. If we can help them connect with their local community and local volunteers as well, then that's working. So yeah, I'd say we've been fairly successful. There's obviously always room for improvement, and we're always looking to do better. But certainly, yeah, we have seen those kind of pockets of smaller communities across London kind of become more engaged in their communities. Again, over the last year, we've had opportunities around the pandemic. So at the start of the pandemic, obviously, a lot of people were kind of shielding. So we hosted opportunities for people to get involved in their local communities, to offer to buy medicine or shopping for anyone who couldn't leave their house. So yeah, I think obviously it's been a tough 18 months for a lot of people, but actually there's been some positives out of it, of people actually re-engaging with their local neighbourhoods and communities. And then on the flip side of that as well, we were also lucky enough to work with the NHS and kind of provide volunteers at the Nightingale hospitals, as well as kind of more recently at the vaccination centres as well. So again, that kind of mix of the bigger event stuff as well as the community-based stuff, I think is something that we've kind of struck a nice balance between.
Yeah, and it's the consistent we hear in this podcast and from people we know and have worked with, like the major events is almost the fire starter, the attraction of people to volunteer, to go, wow, I had a great time there. And it's the emotional connection to volunteering perhaps starts at a Euros that you've just completed. And then I guess for your organisation, then trying to see, hey, you volunteered at the Euros, would you be interested at volunteering down here because there's people that really need some help? Have you seen much transaction of volunteers that progress from that one-off major event that may attract, what did you have at Euros? A couple of thousand volunteers?
Yeah, just under 1,500, yeah.
Yep. So it's like you've attracted 1,500 volunteers into the program, some existing, some new, no doubt, but trying to transition some of them into their community, or is that just more you leave that out there and just hope that some people progress and that's their connection and start of volunteering?
Yeah, I think it's a tricky one because we're obviously aware that people have got different ideas and aspirations about what they do with the volunteering. Some people are happy just to do the kind of one-off events, do it once a year, yeah. and that's fine. And we don't want to kind of pressure people or kind of say that that's the wrong approach to volunteering. We obviously are aware that some people just want to do that. But yeah, equally, we're always open to people doing more. And yeah, if people have enjoyed a major events like the Euros for the first time, we're always happy to offer them other volunteering roles, whether that is other kind of maybe smaller events such as, I don't know, joining their local football team and kind of helping out there as a volunteer, or something completely kind of community based. Yeah, we always try and signpost people if they are, but kind of not put any pressure on it, because yeah, everyone's got different things going on, everyone's got different times of constraints. But yeah, there's certainly been some transition across from the big events are kind of, obviously, like you say, they're the ones that they've got the big budgets, they've got the marketing, so like everyone's aware of them. But then actually from there, you can kind of deep dive into loads more volunteering opportunities where you can actually get a real sense of a connection, particularly if they're kind of ongoing and a weekly basis.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, really interesting, mate. Well, thanks for giving us a good snapshot of the organisation and the incredible work you guys do there in London. I'm also, mate, really interested in your journey to get to where you are, especially on the major events side of the organisation. We were talking before, I know you've made it out to Australia a few times and you've been to the Com Games. So just talk to me a bit about your background and how you've led your journey to be where you are now.
Yeah, it feels like it's been a long journey. Yeah, I've always kind of been keen on kind of sports and yeah, it was kind of interested in it growing up. I did my degree in kind of sports psychology, and then after finishing that, I was kind of looking at different things to do. I managed to get a job working for my local council as a sports development officer, and kind of just went from there. Kind of in that role, it was very very low key, very very localized, kind of organising smaller events or kind of again managing volunteers from there. And it kind of just grew from there. From there, I worked at Wandsworth, the London Borough of Wandsworth, again in the kind of sports development role. But that one, I think it's been mentioned on a previous episode of the podcast as well. I worked a lot with London Youth Games, where I essentially had to organise the Wandsworth entries for the games, so which I mean, it's a couple of hundred athletes across 30 different sports. Obviously, that means 30 different team managers and volunteers. So I was kind of shown this event side, but obviously on a smaller scale, but doing every single aspect of it. I was having to organise the transport, the event entries, the logistics side, as well as the kind of volunteer management as well. So that kind of gave me a really nice taste of kind of bigger events. And from there, I was lucky enough to go out, as you said, go out to the Commonwealth Games in the Gold Coast and work on that, which was, amazing for me to see firsthand an event of that size. It was huge. I was still at university during London 2012, so kind of missed the hype of working on that. So the Commonwealth Games was the first major event for me, and just seeing the scale of it, seeing the number of volunteers there. I was working at the Carrara Stadium and kind of managing volunteers there, and just seeing the enthusiasm for people coming to watch the sports, but as well as the volunteers giving up their time was massive. And then from there, I've kind of just been riding the wave a little bit of the major events. So I was working in Glasgow for the European Championships. I was lucky enough to go out to Abu Dhabi to work on the Special Olympics, as you said as well. Kind of a bit of time in Australia doing Com Games as well as the Australian Open as well.
And what is it about the volunteers that's drawn you into that space? Clearly, you've seen all different facets of events, volunteers being such a big part of it. What is it that's drawn you to work with volunteers?
I think they can really make or break an event. I think a lot of, rightly or wrongly, I'm sure kind of lots of people realise the amount of work and effort that goes in behind the scenes of these major events, whether that is the kind of event management side, the transport side, whatever it is. There's so much work that goes on behind it. But actually, from a member of the public's perspective, the volunteer is quite often the only people they engage with. There's kind of a direct personal connection to an event. Certainly kind of in London and from 2012 that was the case, and it's been mirrored from every event that I've seen since. Everyone can kind of remember the colours of the different volunteer uniforms, always very bright. So I quite like having that connection to the members of the public coming in, the ticket holders. They're seeing the volunteers, and I think the volunteers have got a really big job of, you can really set the mood and set the atmosphere going into any of these events, whether it's a massive Olympics or kind of a one-off event. And volunteers got the impact to just make someone's day, even if it's kind of giving someone a high five on the way in or congratulating their team on the way out. They can really kind of make someone's day. So if I can have anything to do with creating that kind of volunteer atmosphere at the kind of management side, then I think it makes it worthwhile. And I enjoy kind of setting that mood for the volunteers so that hopefully it can pass on to anyone they encounter at the event as well.
Yeah, awesome. And Andy Newman, who's the Director of Workforce of the Com Games in Birmingham, he's on the most recent podcast, so the one just before yours. Andy gave a really good summary of the magic sauce, effectively, the volunteers bring to an event that you can't really put a dollar value on, but it's the reason why people, when they're sitting at home after the event, are talking about, gee, I had a good time there. And a lot of the time, the event is one part of it, but it's often the way you feel about coming into a venue, the excitement levels or the commiserations if your team lost, these sorts of things are engaged by a volunteer. And you also spoke about how that magic is difficult to perhaps create with a paid workforce as well compared to a volunteer workforce. I'm not sure if you've experienced that, almost a difference in paid casual staff versus volunteers, and almost perhaps the different reasons why they're there in the first place. Have you seen a difference in that across the different events you've worked at?
Yeah, I'd certainly agree with him that there is a massive difference. And I think that difference has to come from some people like me who are managing those staff as well. Kind of my style of management and kind of speaking to the volunteers is very different, because they've got such different motivations to be in there. People who are volunteering, they're giving up their spare time. They're not being paid, so that can't be their motivation. So you've really got to find out why it is that they're being involved and kind of try and feed off that a little bit, and make sure that they are well motivated throughout, because whether it's paid staff or kind of volunteers, if someone isn't motivated to do something, it's gonna show in their body language. And I think that really does rub off on other staff or other volunteers as well as members of the public. So I'd certainly agree that the volunteers, it is very unique. It's not like managing a big staff team of casual staff. You do have to find a new style of doing it and kind of engaging with them and making sure that, I think important bit is making sure that you're bringing the energy as well. If even though I know that I'm paid staff, I've got to kind of have that enthusiasm and that kind of joy every single time I'm engaging with the volunteers, just because I know that works with them and kind of offer that additional level of support and kind of just making sure that their experience is a positive one, I think is a massive motivation for volunteers.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tough balance as well. How do you find the balance when you have 1,500 volunteers between treating them like we need 30 here at Zone 1, 150 at Zone 2 stadium? We're freaking out. We're a bit short on numbers. How do you find the balance of treating people as individuals? And because, as you summarised there, for volunteers, they're giving up their time. They've all got their individual motivations of being there, compared to a casual staff where perhaps you can perhaps treat them as the 30 that's over there because, hey, they're being paid to be there anyway. How do you find the balance of connecting to the individual and why you're here? How do we give you something out of the experience as well as to have you helping us? How do you find that balance when you have large volunteer numbers?
Yeah, I think it is a tricky balance. Like I said, there's me from kind of an event operation side of things, knowing that I need all of these numbers at different spots, or we can't open the gates, or kind of can't offer a good level of service, versus kind of the volunteers. They're not aware of any of that. They don't care about the safety measures as such, or they just want to have a good time. They often want to chat to other volunteers that they know. So it is a balancing act. I would say kind of my approach has always been kind of in any briefings or any trainings that we do, kind of setting the scene a little bit of saying, yeah, okay, guys, you're volunteers. We thank you so much for giving up your time, but there are certain things that we need to do to make sure that you guys are safe, make sure members of the public are safe, and ultimately we've got to make sure that the event as a whole runs nice and smoothly. So I think setting the scene for them is really important, but then giving a bit and kind of taking a bit as well of saying, yeah, absolutely fine, you can't turn up at 10 o'clock because you've got to drop your kids off. If you arrive at 10:15, that's absolutely fine. And kind of making sure that you are just treating as much as possible individuals as people, and kind of allowing those differences, and kind of for the bigger scale, kind of filtering that down, making sure that approach is kind of trained into team leaders, so that team leader can also treat their team of volunteers as individuals, making sure that they are rewarded, making sure they've got all those little bits of R&R, the pin badges, the extra uniform, whatever it is, to make sure that, okay, we've given you this extra thing. So actually, can you offer us a bit more support by staying 20 minutes longer because the match is overrun, or giving the team at Zone A a little bit more support? I think as long as you ask people in a kind of sincere kind of way, I think a lot of people are there. Their motivation is to help out, and if they can see that they're offering a little bit more help, I'd say a lot of the time they're more than willing to put in that extra yard.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely. And then we've actually got Matt from Moonshot coming up on the podcast pretty soon. The reason we mention him is about the training, I guess, and engagement of those volunteers and those team leaders. The guys at Moonshot, in my opinion, from events that we work with them on, like the Super Bowl, they do a fantastic job about how do you create the vibe compared to just we need you at gate 1 from 9 till 4. Here's your uniform. Thanks for volunteering. Matt, again, he sort of creates that magic for these programs. What's your experience been there, perhaps with Matt and Moonshot, and what's your opinion on, because clearly you need to invest in that to create that magic outcome, because if you were just like gate 1 for 2 hours, are the volunteers going to be that excited? Are they even going to turn up? There's a balance there of investing into that excitement as well. What's your opinion?
Firstly, great that you got Matt on. Worked with him very closely during the Euros. He helped us out a lot with the training side of things, and he's very much kind of high energy, making sure that, again, as I mentioned earlier, I feel kind of your own body language and kind of enthusiasm really does rub off on people. If you can bring that high energy to every single training session, every single shift, people don't shy away from it. They kind of bring their own enthusiasm as well. And I think he's world class at doing that. Kind of even if it's through humor, if through engagement, kind of listening to people, hearing their stories, and then just the little things of remembering their name for the next time, remembering that, they mentioned that they have got a dog, or whatever it might be, like just remembering that small little bit of information about somebody really makes a massive difference of, I'm not just volunteer for gate A, I'm Matt, he remembers me. It's cool that he knows my name and stuff like that. So I think just putting in that little bit of extra effort goes a long way. And then as long as having that enthusiasm and kind of energy, backing it up with a bit of knowledge as well. Matt talks a lot about visitor experience and kind of every single volunteer knowing exactly what they need to do and knowing where the nearest facilities are, where the nearest toilets are, where the merch is. Just knowing those kind of key questions as well as an enthusiasm is huge for when you're training volunteers, as well as kind of deployment on an event. If you can fill volunteers with enthusiasm and knowledge, then yeah, I'd say they're 90% there in terms of kind of doing a really good job for the event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. And then I guess from your side then, across this podcast, we've interviewed clearly a lot of volunteer managers, and a lot have either started in the event space or casual workspace in there. And I guess what I've picked up is the ability or the skill set that's learned through experience of almost getting out of the way and letting a program run and giving it its own energy, its own life. What have you learnt about sort of being able to empower others, I guess, to execute a program like the Euros? Because clearly there's only one Matt Doherty. How do you go about empowering, firstly, the volunteers, and then probably more the question being around, now in a manager position, you've got colleagues and staff that work under you. What have you learnt across your time from sort of getting out of the way and letting people run their own show as well?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. I think going from kind of, for example, at Commonwealth Games, where I was kind of just in charge of an area, I had kind of 60 volunteers below me, and it was up to me just to, okay, this is our area, let's make this the best section of the stadium. Whereas now, yeah, you, like say, kind of got to try and expand that up and upscale it, because yeah, like say that I've got 1,500 volunteers across London, and yeah, I can't bring that energy to every single one of them. So yeah, I would say it's making sure that the message throughout the organisation, so from me down to my staff, and then when my staff are doing any of the training for the team leaders down to the team member volunteers, I'd say making sure that there's a consistent message, but also giving people a little bit of freedom as well. Kind of finding that balance between, yeah, we've got a clear message, we want to make sure that we all look the same, all got the same uniform, all giving people the exact same information of what they can and can't take into the stadium, for example, but actually then letting people's personalities shine through a little bit as well. I don't want to create 1,500 robots that just say this way for entrance A. I want people to kind of have a bit of their own personality. People approach things in slightly different ways, and I think that is what makes, certainly in my perspective, what makes London great. There are people from all of these different backgrounds, so I'm not going to tell everyone exactly how to do the job. I'm going to tell people this is the information that I want to get across to people. But if you want to do that and have the megaphone and kind of shout about it, make a little dance and song about it, that's perfect for you. And then other people are going to prefer the approach where they get a really good connection with a family coming in and have a nice kind of 5-10 minute conversation, getting to know the family and kind of offering them that support that way. So I'd say the consistent message of what we want to get across, but then letting people feel comfortable, having a bit of their own personality and kind of empowering them to have their own decision-making ability as well, whether that's my staff team, kind of letting them know that, I've got your back, whatever, I believe in you, whatever your decision is on that. At that point, I'm happy to kind of consult with you and make sure you're there, but actually I trust you and I'll back you up there, and kind of filtering that approach down as well, of letting team leaders have a bit of decision-making authority of kind of saying, okay, as long as you're looking after your volunteers, you're trying to help visitors and you're having fun, then kind of, that's the main things for me.
Yeah, for sure. No, that makes a lot of sense, mate. And then clearly with working with volunteers creates its own challenges and crazy moments, no doubt, and some incredible highs and probably some stressful lows too. Are there any moments across your career that really stand out to you, or any particular major learnings that you think you've had about working with large-scale volunteer engagement?
I think that for me, the one big learning is that you've never seen it all. As many of these events as you can do, there's always something that will catch you out. There's always something that will happen for the first time, and you hadn't thought of it as we've all done kind of the tabletop scenario exercises of this happens and then this happens. And when you're in the live event, there's always something else that you didn't even think of and will inevitably become one of your scenarios at the next event. So I'd say kind of, knowing that there will be something that kind of trips you up and being being ready for that of, you can't do all the planning in the world, but you should be able to have the structures in place to be able to be flexible with your approach and learn from things as they do happen, and being agile to, if something does come up, okay, let's find out all the information, see what we need to do next, and find a solution for it. I'd say is kind of my big learning, because obviously this year, Euro 2020, it was played in 21. It was delayed for a year. Nobody could have predicted that a couple of years ago, but we got through it. We managed to find solutions to problems as they came up. Kind of managed to maintain the engagement with our volunteers, even though it was delayed by a whole year. That kind of puts people off, or kind of the fear and the health and safety side of things. So being able to adapt to any situation, I think is a huge learning, and it kind of applies across all events, all settings. Yes, I'd say that's my go-to.
Yeah, I think that's so important for young listeners of this podcast trying to make their way through it, even as a career and as a volunteer manager, or really anything, isn't it? About as long as you learn from those things for next time, it's like you never learn anything until you face those things. Like it's part of the journey. It's not something you try and avoid. It's something you almost need to move towards compared to hide away from. Is probably the learnings I've definitely learned from this podcast so far.
Yeah, definitely, and everyone's got them. Everyone's faced adversity and challenges, but actually, it's how you like you say, how you learn from them, how you overcome them, and can you get a good result out of a bad situation? It is always the aim, and I'd say 9 times out of 10, again, it's from a volunteering perspective. Quite often it's about treating people as people, kind of facing it up and kind of talking to people. Okay, what's the issue you're facing? Okay, this has happened. Okay, that's fine. We're going to find a solution for you. And just, checking back up on people. If there was an incident on their first shift, sticking a note in your diary to give them a call a week later, just checking up on them again. Everything okay? So kind of taking that personal approach to a lot of these situations, I think is a huge learning as well.
Yeah, I think through COVID, if there's something that's come out of it, it's how important kindness is as well, and treating people with that human element, because it has been very sporadic and random. You can't understand everyone's situations as to where they're in. So I think that empathies are a very important part of, in particular for your role, but for any level of volunteer managers out there that might be listening, is certainly one learning that I've had over the last little while. Well, look, Matt, you've been very generous with your time. I know that you guys are really busy at the moment with the large programs that you run. We've touched on a lot today about the best ways to engage with volunteers, in particular large numbers. A good summary for the city as to how Greater London Authority do engage with volunteers. Maybe if one last thing would be sort of, for me, like I told you earlier, I love the way that London engage their volunteers. It's a central place to go. If you want to volunteer, this is where you go to be engaged with your community. My hope here is that other cities around the world are listening to this podcast, which we'll be sharing with them. If there's one sort of piece of advice that you might have for other cities around the world about the best way to structure these types of programs or the benefits of them.
I think firstly, obviously, each city is slightly different. So I would certainly say kind of, not exactly mirroring, but learning from other organisations and cities, I think is the best approach. In London, as we mentioned before, like just the size of London is massive. You can't ever engage with absolutely everybody, but there are so many charities or organisations, event organisers in London that you can always get in touch with and just share a bit of your own knowledge with them, but also kind of look towards a bit of collaboration with them as well. I'd say is key in terms of these volunteers aren't loyal, is the wrong word, but kind of volunteers will happily volunteer with all the events that I'm doing, as well as lots of the events that London Marathon are doing and whatever it might be. So kind of, using that joint knowledge of almost using the volunteers as the network between these different events, of saying, okay, I see you volunteered with Crisis. How did Crisis do their management? Or who's your contact there? I'd love to have a chat with them because they are doing something really different. Or I'd say the engagement with other partners is massive. I'd say that's something that we do fairly well. And then just the engagement with people. People do like hearing from you, even if there's not an event on. Just getting in touch, particularly over the last year, we've done a lot of social events where the aim is just to let volunteers talk to each other through a virtual setting, but we're hoping to kind of transfer that into a face-to-face thing as well, because again, one of volunteers' key motivations is it's a social aspect. A lot of people have friends that they've made over the years, and they use volunteering as their kind of meetups and social aspects. So offering that that as well, I think is a huge part of it. And yeah, just we've said it a couple of times, but treating them as individuals, not just as a number on a spreadsheet. Letting them know that if they need some extra support or kind of need any additional assistance, then we're here. That's our job. We're here to help them, make sure that their volunteering opportunities are as enjoyable as possible. So yeah, I'd certainly say kind of having the structure in place, but then also kind of being agile to your own city, to your own volunteers. Is certainly kind of
the human side.
The best approach to go with.
Yeah, for sure. Lovely, mate. Well, that's a great way to finish. So, Matt, thank you so much for your time, mate. And we'll make sure that we do stay in touch and look forward to the Women's Euros next year. What a great event that's to come.
Yeah, thanks very much. All the best.
Good on you, mate. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Engaged Volunteer Podcast with Matt Doherty. For me personally, programs like Team London are the reason why I'm so passionate about the work we do at Rosterfy. To ensure that people from all walks of life have a central place to go to feel connected to their community. There are so many people around the world that want to volunteer, but all too often we make a difficult and disjointed approach for them to get involved. Programs like Team London make it simple and easy and ensure everyone from all walks of life have a place to go to connect to their community. And although sometimes it's difficult to put a commercial value on that, the social value of volunteering and the stories that come from it are what creates the glue in any community to increase mental health, feelings of belonging, and making a difference. Now, if this is your first time listening, then welcome. Our podcast aims to highlight the ways in which organisations and individuals are engaging with their communities to connect them to events and causes they're passionate about, with new episodes released each Wednesday fortnight. In our next episode, we'll be joined by Matt Lynch, Director of Moonshot, a volunteer and workforce engagement company training some of the largest volunteer programs in the world. Matt and I met at the Super Bowl in Atlanta a few years ago and have worked together for many years now. Matt is a passionate advocate for training and empowering volunteers for two core reasons. One, to ensure they feel like they're a valued member of the team and their time they are volunteering will be going to good use. And two, for administrators to have confidence not only that their retention of volunteers and attendance rates will be high, but when their volunteers arrive, they'll have the confidence and training to execute at the highest level, ultimately to create an outstanding product for your customers. We look forward to joining you in a fortnight.